The year was 1980, and there was two words on everyone's lips: Duke Laverne. His album was top of the charts for weeks on end, and listeners and critics alike had nothing but praise for his bold and innovative techniques in sound. His rags to riches start to his career from a chance meeting with Paul McCartney, eclectic fashion sense, and brusque charm won over the hearts of people from all around the globe. But by the mid-1990s, his musical output would be non-existent, and Duke would be sentenced to 30 years in prison, a sentence he would later evade via escaping during a prison break, at which point he disappeared completely. Duke's history is fragmented, with sources few and far between, the veracity of which are still up for debate. Indeed, his foremost biographer and noted cryptozoologist Errant Gland referred to him as the most elusive of all the creatures he'd tried to find. Using excerpts from my previous interview with Gland as a foundation, I've taken it upon myself to piece together the elements of his story, and finally show the world the illustrious tale of a man who revolutionised the musical world without even realising it. Duke was born in Crumpton, Somerset on the 11th of December 1963. A rural town, Crumpton's main industry was, and still is, based almost entirely around apple farming. The trade was lucrative for the few at the top, but as he was born to a working class family with 11 siblings, Duke was not afforded the luxury of reaping the apple trade's benefits. His father, and his father before him, were all apple pickers, toiling long in the fields under the employ of one of the local farming magnates in return for a pittance. Their servitude was in return for paying off a debt the family had inherited from Duke's great-great-grandfather, who had bet heavily against apple futures and was paying the price for it. Though debts wouldn't be legally inheritable until the Workhouse Re-Legalisation Act of 2024, apple magnates such as the Braeburn Company, the Brothers Cider, and the shrewd Bob the Juicy held an iron grip over County Somerset's courts and ensured that for each shiny red apple which changed hands, another family stayed in debt to their seedy business. Growing up in this environment, Duke experienced firsthand the depths of poverty and exploitation of labour, reflected in one of his first demo tapes, The Apple of My Die. The young Duke was only able to take solace in the few spare moments his family had together, singing hymns, playing his father's guitar, and howling to the sky with his beloved pet dog, Dog. His disgust with County Somerset's apple industrial complex led first to a deep-seated hatred of apple picking, and then to outright rebellion. From his very first songs, his trademark simple yet sufficient rhyming scheme and employment of caninics, a term he used to describe his use of his dog's howling as a musical instrument, was all there. His new sound was a diamond in the rough, waiting to be found.
For someone like Duke to have such an advanced knowledge of musical theory at such a young age, it was simply incredible. We can only speculate how he accrued such knowledge with his lack of formal training. The notation he used on his sheet music for canines, you see here, while others might use various markers to denotate whether a note is held or not, Duke had an ingenious solution. He simply drew a very, very big note.
But Duke wouldn't fully embark on his musical career until later in life. At the age of 15, Duke forsook his family's trade and became a Scrumper, a type of roaming bandit that steals apples and apple-related products. By undercutting the magnate's hold over the apple industry with his 50% markdowns, his one-man operation was transformed into a one-man, 12-dog operation, courtesy of his purchasing of a sled and 11 Jack Russell Terriers, led by Dog, now his canine partner in crime. By day, Duke would exhibit his new sound for all to hear, a unique arrangement of songs to any exhausted apple pickers of Crumpton who happened to wander into the local pub, instrumentation provided by drumming his fingers on his sled along with Dog's howls. By night, he would commandeer his sled around the dirt hills of Somerset, the combined fury of a dozen small dogs carrying him around like the devil's own wind as he scooped armfuls of apples up to stuff into pillowcases tied to the back. He was soon joined by Joey Jojo Jones and Reginald Quantrill, two apple pickers who saw a great musical potential in Duke. With a promise to trim his caninics down to just Dog, the two lent their banjo and drum kit, forming the Somerset Weasels. Unfortunately, much of Duke's material with the Weasels hasn't had official release, given that Somerset would lack any kind of recording studio until its border skirmishes were resolved by royal order in 1984. Duke instead would resort to recording the burgeoning Weasels music onto 8-track tapes for his performances, a move that would prove unwise when bootleg copies of them began to circulate many years later. Their revolutionary, zealous pro-picker lyrics were quick to garner them favour among the working class of Somerset, and the group became a cradle for up-and-coming artists like accomplished spoon player George Tonklin, Gary the Zoo Turpin, and renowned organ grinder Ronnie Cray. However, Duke was struggling to keep his feet in these two worlds, and the more he carried on, the more his day and night activities would mix. Applicants for the band who hadn't any musical talent or didn't fit Duke's new sound would find themselves called to act on the band's revolutionary messages, entering a career of scrumping. After establishing a personal Jack Russell breedery, Somerset found itself awash with slippery, reject weasels and their pack dogs sledding across the night-lit fields of Somerset, carrying pillows emblazoned with the rallying cry of "Ooh-ah!" filled to the brim with forbidden bounties of apples. Eventually, Duke was introduced to Brian Warfield, a harper and member of a small band known as the Wolf Tones. The two bonded over a shared sentiment of working class power in their music, becoming fast friends. His band would occasionally open for Duke's whenever state-mandated holidays forced the Apple magnates to let their employees free for a day, and in return, Duke joined a small drinking club that the band professed membership to. Things wouldn't stay like this, however. The sight of bearded men in plaid carried by hordes of Jack Russells all across Somerset soon turned the attention of the Apple magnates to the source of this wave of scrumping. The authorities dispatched one of their top investigators, Detective Margaret Thatcher, then known as the Pink Lady, for her steadfast loyalty to the Apple industrial complex. Though organised scrumping wasn't prohibited by law at the time, and Duke refused to give up the name of his subordinate Scrumpers, Detective Thatcher was able to kneecap the organisation when it was discovered that the small Irish drinking club Duke had joined was, unknown to him, the Provisional Irish Republican Army, seeking to create a stronghold in Somerset. At the age of 18, Duke packed a bag of apples, his trusty guitar, his worn-down sled, and took a battle-scarred dog and his 11 brave Jack Russell cohorts, and fled Somerset, taking his new sound with him. While the Weasels would continue on without him, their music would take a much different turn sonically. Now fronted by Ronnie Cray, he changed the band's name to The Wurzels, given his fear of weasels. Cray also traded the band's howling and spoon rattling for a more traditional style of country instrumentation, and courtesy of his strict pacifist beliefs, adopted a heavily sanitized style of lyricism for their songs. Duke's movements after this were unknown, only his destination. He claimed to have no recollection of this time, but small newspaper clippings of a travelling musician and his 12-dog band portray a journey that took him eastward, away from Somerset and the reach of the Apple magnates, and towards the capital of the country, London.
It is poetry, really. This was, in essence, his rite of passage into adulthood. He had grown up with the dogs, and now he would grow with the dogs. He emancipated himself from material attachments, focusing only on music and travel.
Delirious and dazed, having subsisted solely off of apples while using his spare tips gained to feed his canine crew, Duke entered London in a non-linear state. He walked the streets without a clear direction of where to go, having embarked on his journey without a specific destination in mind, steered forward only by pure fear and desperation, until something stopped him in his tracks. Standing tall was the Apple Corps headquarters. A large banner of its logo hung over the front to celebrate the company's recent move to a new building. Duke described what followed in an interview a few years later.
You gotta understand, I just come from Somerset. You know, place was independent at the time, Scotland hadn't annexed it yet. And all these bloody corporate Apple people, all of that just came flooding back, you know. All of them sitting in their bloody oaky towers, thought I'd finally found the source of it all, you know. I mean, it was right there, innit? Apple Corps. So, you know, me and the dogs, we all barred the back door down and we started scrumping.
But you didn't find any apples there?
Oh, no, not really. I
Found a record, did you?
Yeah, I suppose I did. Accidentally left one of my demo tapes there, you know. Paul picked it up after I'd made a right mess, and then I scarpered. He took it home, gave it a listen, and he tracked me down the week after. Then I was part of Apple Corps.
Isn't it apple cores?
It is?
Yes, it's a pun, like how the armies, they have cores in them. That's what the groups are called. And it sounds like core, because apples have cores.
A pun?
Yeah, a play on words, yeah. So it's spelt apple corpse, but then you say apple cores.
Oh. That's dishonest.
Having grown tired of overproduced, formulaic music many years ago, the stripped-down instrumentation and use of K9X was revolutionary to him. McCartney fell in love with Duke's new sound, and with his permission, released it to the public as Duke's first official release. At only 18 years old, Duke Laverne shot up the charts with Scrumper's Blues, a polyrhythmic dirge lamenting his fights against the Apple magnates, his hope for an uncertain future, and his adoration for his dozen-dog band that had been at his side the whole time.
it's almost, it's angelic. It's angelic. The composition, the instrumentation, God in heaven, everything about it is perfect. I don't think there's a single wrong note there. The first time I heard it, I remember, clear as day. I dove onto the radio. I put my ear up against the speaker. I requested the track over and over again until the stations, they blocked my number. Oh, I would commit hideous atrocities just to be able to listen to it for the very first time again.
It wouldn't be too long that England, and eventually Europe at large, would become familiar with Duke and his new sound, as Scrumper's blues received airtime all over the continent. A new chapter of Duke's life was beginning, and from here on out, he would only push the envelope of music even further.